Well, welcome to this edition of the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We have Kirk here with us
Good
this
evening. Good
this
afternoon.
afternoon. Yeah, afternoon. I think it's still, well, I guess it is afternoon now for you, or close
Yeah.
there to it in the People's Republic of California. How is life in California and Carmel these days?
It's cold.
It's
Oh, this is a sweater and it's not enough. And I'm indoors.
Oh, here I thought that California was supposed to be spectacular and warm.
It's a lie.
The program that Leah just brought up is
Uh-huh.
having a tough time. I'm not seeing anything we'd normally see. It's repeating the introduction over and over again.
Oh,
The YAHOWAH blog, there is no camera that shows anything of us.
I can see you.
Okay,
And I
well,
can
let me go
and
out.
I'm behind the live sign, 120.
Oh, you know what I think it might have been is that might have been the show that we had to cancel for lack of headsets. Oh, now I can see you there. Okay, we can make this
Okay.
work.
Okay.
We are almost professional here. I now see it. And welcome to the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn, and this is Captain Kirk up there in screen.
Good afternoon again.
Yeah, screen left. What had happened here is that we tried to go live about 2 minutes earlier and forgot that you were with us, and I have to have headsets if I'm going to hear you, and that requires some rewiring that
It's okay.
we hadn't done. All right, this is episode 11, I believe, of Dowd's Fulfilment of Pesach, Matzah Bikurym. Even though we have finished our celebration this year of Chag Matzah, there is so much more to learn from the 22nd Mizmor. We'll continue with it. The timing happens to be really good, Kirk, because this is nap time for Christians. So they're probably not paying attention today. Nap time for Christians. Their God was killed by Jews. Yeah, I probably don't know that Jews crucified their victims in the first century.
I missed that totally.
Yeah, and Jews had full autonomy to do that in Roman-occupied
Oh,
Judea.
yeah.
Oh, maybe it was Palestine. I forgot, who
It's
knows what it was. But anyway, they had full autonomy to do that sort of thing. And according to the Christian New Testament, the dastardly Jews crucified the Christian God. Now, of course, there are some issues with that theory. One of which is that, of course, it was Rome that had the ability to crucify. And if they blamed Rome for crucifying their God, then they have no basis for the religion, because the religion is entirely based on blaming Jews,
replacing
to the extent that God said, maybe I made a lot of promises to them. I'm old, I forgot. But since they killed me, I'm not going to have anything to do with them again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer all those promises over to the Romans and the Greeks. Oh, wait a minute. Wasn't it the Romans that actually crucified? Oh, I don't know. I'm old. I forget. We'll go ahead and go with some other crazy plan. And then, of course, on that God, the Christians forgot to explain why it was on that day that it would be a good idea for him to be crucified. Because if they actually specified it as Passover, then you couldn't blame the Jews for killing their God, because it's the purpose of the Passover lamb to die, and therefore it would be a good thing, not a bad thing. But they didn't think that part of the plan through. And of course, according to YAHOWAH, it's a really bad thing to celebrate Passover, which is what happened when Dowd offered his Bashar body as the Passover lamb on this day, on the day of Passover. And that's a really good thing, but not without matzah, because it gives you eternal life, but you're not perfected. And eternal life unperfected means you're going to spend eternal life separated from YAHOWAH. And that would be that place called Sheol, named after the author of most of the Christian New Testament, Shaul, Paul. That's a really bad plan that they've got going there. And of course, they don't want to mention matzah, because the purpose of matzah is to cleanse our souls of religious and political guilt. But it's hard to do that when you're trying to start a politicized religion. So they just forgot about all of that. And therefore, between the death of their God and the resurrection of their God took a nap. So this was time for Jesus. Yeah. And then, if that were not bad enough, nap time for Jesus on the Saturday. And I don't know how do you establish this so that Easter every year could be on a Sunday, because it's based on the renewal of light on the moon's surface, and it's always the 14th, 15th, and 16th day after the light begins to renew on the moon's surface, and this just doesn't line up with days of the week. So
no,
this doesn't work.
Amazing, isn't it? It's a miracle.
It doesn't work really well for their plan. But beyond all of that, the Holy of Holy Days, the Holy of Holies in Christianity, was named after the Mother God and the Queen of Heaven.
Mm-hmm. The star.
Yeah, was named after Jesus' mother, Ishtar. And so they didn't even bother to change the name from the most important pagan holiday of the year, Ishtar Day. Oh my. And this is a religion that over 2 billion people are going to celebrate tomorrow. When you say, wait a minute, you can't have an Ishtar Day. That's named after a Babylonian goddess, the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of God. Who are you kidding here? Oh, well, I would tell you that, in fact, I had one person on Facebook tell me that I was going to hell because, this person was a Messianic Jew and told me I was going to hell because of the realization that Dowd was actually the Messiah and the Son of God, and there was no Jesus, there was no Yahusha.
So 2,000 years and no one's put that together the way you just did. Isn't that amazing?
No, 2,000 years. And it's so obvious, right? What part of that shouldn't be obvious? How really just stupid it is.
I baffles. It's just amazing.
Yeah. I had another person say that if you wanted to listen to Craig's teaching, you need to run everything through Grok, the AI.
That's funny.
And now, this has been available to Grok too. Did you hear Grok say, no, Easter can't be true because, well, it's named after a pagan goddess and resurrection would be counterproductive for a spiritual being going to heaven. And, oh, by the way, what was the purpose of the death? Why was it timed for that particular day? If it was Passover, why aren't you complimenting and congratulating the Jews for doing it? And if it isn't Passover, why aren't you taking credit for doing it since it was the Romans? And therefore, how can God transfer the promises from Jews to a church if it was the Romans that crucified him and not the Jews? There's so many holes in that theory. They call it Swiss cheese when you have holes in a theory, but that would not be fair in this case because there's no cheese. There's no cheese. Hey, speaking of holes in theories, I don't know if you've been paying attention here, but science, astronomy, and physics is in a world of hurt right now. They launched this Webb telescope, and the Webb telescope is supposed to take really wonderful pictures of deep space.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the problem with the Webb telescope is it's taking pictures of galaxies that had to form before the universe existed. Yep, that's what it's doing. It's taking pictures of galaxies that are 14 billion years old, and there is no chance that a galaxy could have formed within better part of 1 billion years of the time after the Big Bang. And so they're now speculating, well, maybe the universe is really 27 billion years old. So there's at least 7 of these galaxies now that the Webb telescope has found that are dated to older than the universe. So I would say that's a problem for the theory. They don't quite know what to do with it because they've got no explanation, and they're really they've reinvented themselves way too many times for credibility. So yeah, there's a real upheaval in universal Genesis. And one of the things I have said from the beginning is that the initial theories of the Big Bang don't hold water. First, the term is actually Yahowah. He's the one that came up with Big Bang. But until quarks are confined, time doesn't move. So you have no idea how much time transpired from the initial explosion that Yahowah conceived to the time that quarks could confine, because without quarks confining, all you've got is a milieu of energy. And where there is no matter, time doesn't move. Time simply exists. Complicated concept, but that's nonetheless the reality of it. And so of course, they have no idea how long that was, and they want this infinite expansion at an instant where the universe went from really, really tiny to really, really big. And not bothering to explain that if it was really, really tiny, it couldn't become really, really big because the gravity would be too massive for anything to expand out of it. And they're also now saying that there is a problem with the expansion of the universe theory too. The universe, we have learned, is expanding faster than the speed of light. And that's why we're measuring the universe, and it's 94 billion light years across, which is fairly hard for it to be if it was only created 14 billion years ago. How does it get to be any more? If we were in the exact center of it, which it appears that we are, how does the universe get to be any more than 28 billion light years in diameter if it was created 14 billion years ago and nothing moves faster than the speed of light?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you. Obviously, the answer is it's impossible. So what they came up with is, okay, so that's impossible. So our theory is that it is space that is expanding. And okay, so that's the theory. But the problem with that theory is that, first of all, they're now finding evidence through the Webb telescope that theory is false and that the universe is just much older than what they had thought. But also that once you go to that point and you say that the universe is expanding, in fact, it's expanding according to them at twice the speed of light, that means that it would be impossible for any light to reach us, which means we couldn't actually see the stars. If the stars are moving away from us faster than the speed of light,
yes,
at the speed of light coming to us,
you can't come back.
Would never reach us.
No.
So if the object is moving away from us twice the speed of light, and light at light speed is moving towards us, it's always going to be retreating from us and never reaches.
Got it. Makes
so we
sense.
couldn't see the stars.
No. Problem.
So anyway, there are some glitches right now in universal cosmology that they're trying to iron out without losing all credibility. What they actually say, this is a very exciting time in cosmology.
Let's see if we get any more money.
We're having to test our theories. All right, we're going to return to where we were, and based upon what we have just read, if nothing else, we have, by exposing in our program last night, the comparison, the unicorns and the English translations, particularly in the King James. King James must really have had a thing for unicorns. He may have been gay, for all I know. I mean, I understand girls, they just love unicorns.
Oh,
a boy that loves unicorns, not so much. Got nothing against a gay boy, but still, unicorns. What it told us for certain is that we ought not be trusting English translations.
Good thinking.
Yeah, good thinking. And an unfathomable amount of manure has been piled on top of Yahowah's words. The truth is still there, as magnificent as ever, but sometimes we have to hold our noses a bit when digging past man's garbage. So, the truth is, we were not with Abraham on Mount Moriah when his example foretold of Dowd's sacrifice 40 Yobel, or 2,000 years later. We were not with Moshe on Mount Joreb 3,450 years ago when Yahweh recounted this story to him regarding the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah Bikurym, all for our edification. We were not with Dowd when he composed the 22nd Mizmor about what he would endure when fulfilling them. And we were not standing outside of the Damascus gate, witnessing that what our Messiah was doing for us on Passover when he fulfilled these words. And I may have been, I'm that old, but you certainly weren't there. Leah wasn't.
Yeah, I'm older.
But
not that old.
Okay. But we do have something equally, I think, equally revealing. And that is the words that were written, and in this case, that our Savior wrote. Mm-hmm. And they're more than enough. It's not a lot different, I don't think, in hearing Dowd speak about what he endured and setting the scene than being there. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it's better because this way we don't have to go into Sheol to witness what he endured there. So I'd say that's probably an advantage.
That's the deal, yeah.
Yeah, that's an advantage. So in them, of course, we do have affirmation that Dowd loved his father. His treatise continues. I have chosen to continually recount, providing a written record of your name to my brethren within the midst of the summoned community who have been called out, so as to radiate your brilliant source of enlightenment and extol your virtues. This is Psalm Mizmor, Song 22:22. One of the things that I wrote today in social media is to say, so if your Jesus was, Mr. Christ and everything, mm-hmm. He was God on earth, why didn't he write anything down?
Must have been illiterate, huh?
Yeah, I suppose. I say one choice is that he was illiterate and couldn't write anything down, or he didn't really care if you knew what he said or did, because
the only one.
He was a myth, so not that myths care much about that sort of thing. Myths much prefer people to write about them than myths typically do write about themselves. Just like we don't have much from the hand of Dionysus either, do we? Or Osiris? No. It's pretty much the same thing. So, second question I asked, okay, so then if you were to say, why would he have to bother to write? He had his disciples around him. Well, all the other prophets wrote. Why was the big guy suddenly an exception to the example that Yahweh set? Oh, well, we don't want to think about that. Okay. All right. Then I've got another one for you. That being the case, why was the first eyewitness account? And we don't even know it's an eyewitness account because we have no way of attributing it to John. But why was the first eyewitness account? Because the others are not eyewitness. They're all hearsay. Why was the first eyewitness account written 60 years, 3 generations after the fact? If this was
very important, huh?
Goddamn important, why was the first written account of it written by someone who we can't even prove it was that individual, and it written far, far away in Ephesus in a different language 3 generations later, 6 decades? How could this be important and that be the case? Is God that sloppy? And why is it, I also said, is that when we finally have a written record, whether it be hearsay, which 3 of the 4 were, and the other was written 6 decades later, why is the first written record filled with errant translations of what Yahweh spoke through his prophets? There isn't one single accurate rendering, even quasi-accurate rendering of anything Yahweh said. Why is that? And why, after all of this time and them misappropriating and mistranslating all these passages, why couldn't they find a single one that had Mr. Christ's name in it? Or ask this way, why did 100% of those they pilfered have Dowd's name in them? And are we to believe that the Christian God, actually it wasn't the Christian God because that would be Jebus, the one that was illiterate and didn't bother to write,
Correct.
but the father of the Christian God, are we to believe that Dad didn't know his own kid's name? That he was that old that he was had a senior moment and I don't know what his name was. And why did, since all of those prophecies mention Dowd, why does the Christian New Testament say that, but he didn't even make it to heaven?
I know.
Because the guy that they claim all these prophecies about, he himself, they claim, didn't make it to heaven. So
that's correct.
These prophecies pertain to the guy whose name is not mentioned, then he can't be in heaven either, can he?
No.
Why has nobody pointed this out to them? I don't know. Anyway, I have chosen to continually recount, providing a written record. That's what tipped me off. Here's the actual Messiah. Here is a man who is acting in the role of a prophet. He happens to be the king of Israel. He is the real McCoy, son of God, according to God, Messiah, according to God. And he's providing a written record. And he's going one step further. His written record is written 1,000 years before he actually fulfilled Pesach Matzah.
Yeah.
While the counterfeit can't write a single word down at any point during his mythical life, not a single word.
No.
And that nobody who was around him wrote anything about him until we go all the way to Ephesus in 95 CE, 62 years after these events transpired. That's your story.
Yeah.
Oh, but they say, but Josephus wrote about him. And you say, all right. So
Josephus, really?
That's your go-to guy, right? He's the traitor who lied about most everything.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that was a traitor to Rome against his own people. And virtually everything he said was a lie, including his most famous of all stories, the Masada story of the suicide pact and all that kind of stuff, the holdouts, complete and utter fabrication from beginning to end. And so he was a liar. He was a traitor. Or should know that how old was Josephus when he witnessed these events that you want to claim he's your guy?
He must have been young, right?
Well, I would say so. I would say he hadn't been born yet.
Okay, that's close. I knew he was young.
Yeah, he hadn't been born yet. And yet that's going to be your eyewitness. That's your go-to guy.
No problem, Houston.
All he is saying is that there were those who thought that there was this, and who knows what word he wrote of, because we don't have a Greek text. All we have is a Latin text, and it dates to the 10th or 11th centuries. I mean, it's way removed from these events. Again, there is no Greek text, so who knows who he called this individual? But he, there was some individual that people said was such and such a person, but we don't have the original in the original language. And all it says is this is what was said. And by that time, because in 52 CE, Paul, who was not an eyewitness and who admitted he was demon possessed, read the end of the 2 Corinthians, he's the one that began to promote that myth. And by the way, where was Paul when he wrote many of these and letters that actually died at the end with copies of his letters?
Well, that was by that time he's almost to Rome, isn't he? Or he's
He
in
was in
Greece?
Rome. You betcha.
Yeah.
He was in Rome. Where did Josephus the traitor write?
He was in Rome too?
So yeah, there you go.
Thought so. Okay.
Yeah. And then we have this little problem with Josephus. If that weren't already enough to be buried
400
10
years
times
later.
over on your theory,
Yeah.
because he's not an independent eyewitness historian if he wasn't even born during the events. He wasn't a credible historian because most of what he wrote turned out to be untrue, including his most important story. 3, he said almost nothing about it. 4th, we have no copy of what he wrote in the language he wrote, so we don't even know what names he actually used. All we have is a Latin manuscript that dates into the 10th century. So 1,000 years later. And the only actual copy, the only actual citations of any consequence of Josephus' work, guess where they were kept? The only copies that anyone has ever been able to identify may have existed someplace in the world. Do you know where they were kept?
I'm not sure.
Eusebius. Eusebius is the guy who authored a huge swath Christian New Testament. He is actually the fellow who wrote "You are the Christ, and upon this rock I'll build my church." That was written in the mid 4th century, first time appearing in Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, that Eusebius wrote. And he's the guy that wrote that line. And then after writing the line, he tossed away all of the manuscripts that he had in his possession because they didn't say any such thing.
That's
so that's the best you got. You got worse than nothing. So the fact of the matter is, the moment you come to recognize that Dowd wrote down 1,000 years in advance of him fulfilling Pesach, Matzah Bikurym, exactly what he was going to endure, describing crucifixion 1,000 years before he endured it and 700 years before it even existed, and gave us a medical depiction of how crucifixion kills 3,000 years before we would understand that. And so this prophetic portrayal exists in writing, with Dowd himself saying, I'm the one who endured this, versus essentially nothing.
Yes.
Hearsay, lies, fabrications, contradictions, misappropriations. You got nothing on the Christian New Testament. I mean, literally nothing other than identity theft. Versus Dowd. And with Dowd, guess what we have? The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes, we do.
We have scrolls that date to 250 years before Dowd fulfilled Pesach, Matzah Bikurym, that affirm what he wrote 3,000 years ago. It's a slam dunk. I mean, it's just over at that point. Dowd said, I'm going to do this. He described exactly what he was going to do. He put it in writing. We have copies of what he wrote dating to hundreds of years before he fulfilled this. And it's rife with all manner of precise prophecies that would have been impossible to write unless he had been inspired to say these things, versus drivel.
Yes.
Mizmor 22, Psalm 22, is proof in and of itself that Christianity is a complete farce. There was no resurrection. There was no death of Jesus. There was no Jesus. Mr. Christ never existed. He's nothing but a product of identity theft and a crude counterfeit of Dowd, mixed in with a heavy dose of Odysseus and Dionysus, with, of course, a resurrection on the Mother of God, Queen of Heaven, Ishtar Day. Oh, and a birth. Well, we can't forget the birth on the day that Romans celebrated the birth of the Son of God, Mithras, which would have been Constantine's god at the time, on the winter solstice.
Yes.
Out of way, buddies. You nailed it. That's why they call it faith, right?
Yeah. If you took this script of what you just said and you presented it tomorrow to the local church, would it move their needle, or they would just throw rocks at you? I mean,
yeah, it's interesting that as a person, of course, all people of faith, when they're presented, I mean, this is absolute proof that Christianity is
beyond doubt,
absolute, unequivocal proof, undeniable, irrefutable,
you can't debate it. No.
Proof that no one can debate that Christianity is a fraud. There was no Jesus Christ. It was a crude counterfeit of David, mixed in with huge amounts of Dionysus religiosity. And Christmas and Easter are entirely pagan. And that 100% of the prophecies that they use to justify their faith were all misappropriated, misquoted, and they all mention Dowd as the beneficiary of them. And then it's filled with all manner of lies, including Jews crucifying the Christian pretend God. And so, having written the 5 volumes of Twistianity, and I can assure you they're back there on that shelf. It looks like they're on the top shelf to the left side of the screen, the left side of the man that's pushing all the religious rubbish away. Looks like that's where they are up there. Those are the 5 volumes of Twistianity. They prove 1,000 times over that, probably more than 1,000 times over, just what I've done here, that Christianity has a 0% possibility of being true. And so when a Christian hears this, they do what the person did on Facebook today. They say that you're going to hell, and that you're a heretic, and that I believe otherwise. And the same thing is true on X. No matter where you go, that's what you get. And they all attack ad hominem, which means they demean me as the messenger because they can't refute the message. They will occasionally quote their New Testament, which says, if you doubt any of this, then you're a demon. And it's really clever. Muhammad claimed the same thing. Allah claimed the same thing. It's pretty much standard religious fare to say that, anyone who disagrees with you is a demon. Of course, the Quran has the problem, as does the New Testament, because the demons also agreed with what they were writing. There's whole Quran surahs where the jinn, the demons, just have a field day saying how wonderful Muhammad is and the Quran is. And there's even a Quran surah that says that all of Allah's messengers speak for Satan. And of course, in the Christian New Testament, since Paul admits that he's demon possessed, he's the inspiration for the whole thing. You got a problem. In fact, Paul in his conversion meeting even quotes Dionysus, where he says it's difficult to kick against the goad. Was Dionysus' famous line in pagan lore, which Dionysus used to say, as a mortal, it's very difficult for you to contradict and counter the gods because people won't believe you. So it's difficult to do what we're doing, is Dionysus' famous line, because people believe that what they say is fair and true. So it just doesn't register. And it's why when I rewrote Twistianity, I wasn't rewriting Twistianity for Christians. I was rewriting it for Jews. When I rewrote Goddamn Religion from Prophet of Doom, I wasn't rewriting it to save Muslims. I was rewriting it to save Jews from Muslims.
Yes.
And so I'm not out here, and we're not out here to try to save the religious. You were
Christian,
3/4 of the way out of Christianity when you first heard me explain how Christianity is false and Yahowah is right. God hates religion, and I didn't learn this truth until I was well out of religion either. So it's just not going to appeal to the religious person. But here we are. Dowd says, I have chosen to continually recount, providing a written record, all of Yahowah's prophets, and Dowd is, of course, more than a prophet because he is a player and a prophet.
Mhm.
There's really only two of those players
The
and prophets.
Romans.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Moshe and Dowd. There are lots of players in God's story. There's lots of prophets in God's stories. There's only two that are player prophets, and Dowd is one of the two of them. He then goes to speak of your name, and oh my gosh, that explosion that we see, the video that was created by AI that misled the
Mhm.
temple. It screams Adonai in the background. It's so whiny, it just want to claw your eyes out or ears off or whatever when you hear it. And even the most ardent protectors of Israel on X will say, that Hashem will do this. And you come on and say, please, after 3,000 years of erasing his name, why are you so devoted to not accepting it, to not saying it? Don't you trust what Moshe wrote in the Torah?
Mhm.
You claim that the Torah is your constitution, and right there in the Torah it says that Yahweh's one and only name is Yahweh. Would you believe your rabbis over God? Well, Joe didn't have a problem with Yahweh's name. He loved it.
Yeah. There's in Shemoth, it's the second book. And I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only does it say this is his name, it says not to mess with it, not to change it.
Mm-hmm.
He even says, Yahweh will not forgive or leave unpunished. What do you want? Do it out of nothing else. Just, were you nuts?
Yeah. See, the two tablets that were written in stone, beyond telling Moshe, my name is Yahweh, that's my only name, the name I want to be remembered for all time and all generations. Then he handed Moshe two sets of tablets, of two tablets each time. Evidently, the battery life wasn't long on them, and the first set wore out. No, the Jews were out being religious, building building a golden calf. And so Moshe said, "Oh my God, what's wrong with these people? They're impossible." And he, in a fit of anger, he broke the first. He broke the first set. It's like Leah playing with a new tablet. By the time you get it from her, it's already. But here's Yahweh in the
That's
first
your
statement.
producer you're talking about now. Be careful.
My producer, yeah, she's rough with technology. We're gonna have a black screen here in just a moment, but
I like you, Leah. I want you to know that.
Yeah, he's saying I like you, Leah. He wants you to know that. Okay, so yeah, he doesn't want to go black screen up there. You're gonna have an X across mine. So actually, she's in this pretty deep. So I'm not sure there's any way out at this point for Leah. She's committed. So there you go. That goes both ways. We have an arranged marriage, and to go against our the one that arranged our marriage would be a really bad idea.
Swim with the fishes.
Yeah. So anyway, it is Yahweh's name. Oh, the first tablet. What's the first statement that Yahweh says?
He says,
I am Yahweh, your God. I am Yahweh, your God. And you're not going to live with any other gods in my presence. I'm the one that liberated you. Yeah, I'm it. So you don't have to read very far into it. I mean, first line, first tablet. I'm Yahweh, your God. And of course, the next bit is the longest. I mean, it's really long. Don't be religious. I don't want you to go into a religious environment. I don't want you to do religious pictures. Don't make religious artifacts or items. Nothing religious. Don't talk religion. Don't be religious. Don't promote religion. Don't give money or lip service to. Just don't be religious. If you're religious, you're going to condemn your own sons to the third and fourth generation. Don't do that. That's the second statement, paraphrased. The Yahweh was even more explicit. The third says, that anyone who negates the value of Yahweh's name will never be forgiven.
Yeah.
Ever. That's why the mommy goddess cult is in real trouble, because that was the first thing that they did to justify their mommy
God.
love. Yeah, this whole mommy dogma that they went into is that they had to change Yahweh's name to have Yahweh have an equal part. So Father Yah and Mommy Yah had to be two separate personalities with different, entirely different personas and different instructions, and they had a different voice and all of this sort of thing. And they had to change Yahweh's name to accommodate that. And what God says, if you do that, you're in serious trouble. And so you'd have thought that that would have been enough to get people's attention. But anyway, Dowd wrote down Yahweh's name. To my brethren. He's not speaking to Goyim. Okay, if you're a Goy, you can read this, but that's not who he's writing this to.
Mm-hmm.
My brethren, Jews. Within the midst of the summoned community who have been called out. What people were called out according to Yahweh?
Israel.
Israel. That's it. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
So as to radiate your brilliant source of light, enlightenment, extol your virtues, halal, become radiant and ongoing with you. Now, I realize that most translations want to render halal as praise, but that's not what halal means. Halal means to radiate light.
Shine forth. Yeah, all those. Yeah.
Okay, so Israel's most acclaimed shepherd and king, Yahweh's Messiah and son, recorded, related, recounted, declared, and proclaimed God's Shem, his personal and proper name. Too bad his brethren failed to follow his example. Dowd affirmed what his people have made a religion out of denying and doing it to this day. It isn't just interesting, it is religion shattering that Dowd never departed from his first person account of Pesach and Matzah. He does not speak ever of another individual, nor ever address a third person. You will never find Jesus or even Yosha or Yeshua or any other contrived name on his lips or scribed from the point of his pen or anyone else's. It simply does not exist. It is absolutely impossible that if you're going to claim the Torah and prophets and the Psalms as inspired by your God, and then claim that Jesus is the biggest deal ever, that he started this new religion, that it changes everything with the New Testament, and there's not a single mention of him in the entirety of that book? Are you out of your mind? Talk about ludicrous, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
You think this one arrival changes everything. You claim that there's hundreds and hundreds of prophecies that pertain to it, and yet you can't find one that's credible. You can't find a single mention of his name, of his title, anywhere, ever. And then you have to lie and misquote and misappropriate passages that not only have nothing to do with him, but actually pertain to this guy, Dowd. Since Yahweh inspired every Nabi, since they're all keen on conveying Dowd's name, and none mentioned anyone named Jesus. So it is 1,100 to 0. You know, and Little League, I coached Little League for years. We had a mercy rule. Christianity claims to be based on mercy, but they've lost this one 1,100 to 0. You think somebody would say, well,
Call it off.
let's
Go home.
call the mercy rule here.
Good.
Well, that makes the misnomer Iousu Christou, Jesus Christ, completely inappropriate from God's perspective. This crude counterfeit would be no more God than Julius Caesar. In fact, Julius Caesar's actually got a much better claim.
Yeah.
He actually existed.
Yes, he did.
And oh, by the way, he has the same initials. I wonder if that's a coincidence.
It's helpful.
JC, baby.
Oh, only you come up with this stuff. It's amazing.
I just do it to keep you entertained, Kirk.
I appreciate it.
Been friends for a long time. It would get boring.
Yeah, this is good.
Curiosity prompts us to consider why the lie would be preferred 1,000,000 to 1 over the truth, since the score of this game is 1,100 to 0, especially since the world is preoccupied with a corruption of a name that Yahowah never once mentions. A third of the planet's occupants will celebrate, well, Easter tomorrow. They're going to actually, you know what they're going to do? They're going to search for eggs that are laid by a bunny. So there are miracles in Christianity.
You ain't kidding.
The Easter bunny
And they're
is the
chocolate.
only bunny ever to lay eggs. And it's the only bunny to walk upright on 2 feet and carry a basket around as well. And it was the Goliath, of course, of bunnies that performed in this role, because the bunny is typically 5-6 feet tall. So there are miracles in Christianity. I do want to see a confab, though, between the Easter bunny and Santa Claus vying for authenticity with Jesus Christ. I mean, why not have Julius Caesar, JC, the Easter bunny, and Santa Claus all there at a Comic-Con convention, and we'll see which one of these.
Welcome to San Diego. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one of these is real? Even in his alleged death and resurrection, they, of course, make JC far more like Dionysus or Osiris than anyone spoken of by God. Dowd volunteered to endure this sacrifice because he loved Yahowah, respected Yahowah, and, well, he was king. Therefore, he had a responsibility to his people.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said something that, well, is rather important.
Yes,
Too bad outside of our company, there was not a Jew in the world that pays any attention to this. Yada Yahowah, halal. Respect and revere Yahowah, to radiate his light. You've done a glossary, Kirk. Have you found any pronunciation for the Y in Yahowah that is different than, like, the sound of the English yes?
No.
Like Yisrael?
No, this is it.
Yahowah?
Yeah, E-I-O-U in both languages.
Okay.
So, no.
How about the sound as it appears in Torah, or the verb haya?
H,
How you doing on
yeah.
finding a different pronunciation for the hey sound?
No.
Oh.
H.
Okay. Now, the Hebrew WA does have a couple of options.
Yes.
The book we find it in is called what is that book? The Torah, right?
Oh, yeah, Torah.
Oh, yes. And how is the WA pronounced in the book that brings us Yahowah's name?
Torah. Torah.
Oh, it's an O, okay.
With it,
And
yeah,
how about the single most repeated?
Shalom.
That's the one. Single most repeated Hebrew word throughout all time, shalom. And the O sound in shalom comes from
the Wa.
the Wa.
Yeah.
And how many names are there in Hebrew that begin with Yah-O?
Oh, thousands.
Thousands. Well, I'm not sure it's thousands, but there's hundreds.
Well, yes, tons of them.
Yeah. It's not difficult, folks. This is the proper pronunciation of the name of, oh, there it is, Elohah,
Yahowah.
with the O coming from the Wah, as directed by his Torah, with the O sound coming from the Wah, and the Ah sound right there for you. Teaching regarding his Haya, that was the verb Yahweh said was the basis of his name. There's the Yod and the Hey. Existence and our Shalom. There we go again with that O sound. Restoration. To radiate his light. You know, if you're going to benefit from what Dowd has done at Pesach and Matzah so that you can participate in Bikurym, firstborn children, you are going to radiate God's light. You're going to go from a material being to an energy-based being. So that's what Dowd is saying. Respect Yahweh's name, respect what he has done, you'll be transformed into light. But what happened with the Christian Jesus?
Well, he just went
He
dead.
went from flesh to flesh, didn't he? How was
Then they
that progress?
resurrected.
How was that progress to go from
Kind of
flesh to
zombie.
flesh? They just didn't think any of this through.
No, sir.
And how small does God have to be for all of God to fit into a man? And oh, by the way, where was God when Jesus was taking a nap, if all of God was in him bodily? And if all of God was in him bodily, didn't the Jews then, if we to believe the Christian New Testament, really kill God?
Yeah, you know what happened.
Well, he took a nap. It was restorative.
Story.
And he became Dionysus. Every descendant, Zerah, of Jacob, you should choose to consider him worthy of respect and massively significant. Jesus? No. Allah? No. Hashem? No.
No.
Adonai? No. Who did he just talk about? Oh, that Yahweh fellow. Respect and revere Yahweh to radiate his light. Every descendant of Jacob, that would be Yisrael, you should choose to consider him worthy of respect and massively significant. And you should want to live with him, all your descendants of Yisrael. What? So he's just said, if you want to live with him, if you want to radiate his light, that the way for you to be transformed from a physical being that is decaying to radiating God's light and therefore being an immortal and perfect being, empowered and enriched, is to respect Yahweh's name and to pay attention to what Dowd is speaking of here. And what has Dowd spoken of in the first 22 verses of the 22nd Mizmor?
Pesach, Matzah, more. Oh, wait,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
20,
Yeah, his
more.
fulfillment of Pesach,
Yeah.
Matzah Bikurym. So there might be a clue. If you want to go from being a mortal, limited in time, with death being your end, and decaying all the way along the process, to a light-based, energy-based being, perfected, eternal, like God, radiating his light, living with him in Shamayim as part of the covenant family, then in addition to respecting Yahweh's name and respecting the fact that Dowd himself fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym, you may want to attend these 3 days, capitalizing on what they represent, which is impossible if you're influenced by Rabbinic Judaism or Christianity, because you either ignore all three of them or two of the three. So Dowd just said by this particular summary that the way to benefit from all of this is, in fact, to pay attention to what he has just delivered in terms of this message. So Dowd was speaking of something he knew better than anyone. He recognized it when he wrote these songs, when he lived with his Father in heaven at the conclusion of Pesach and Matzah, and especially when fulfilling Bikurym as Yahweh's firstborn, as the Messiah returned to heaven. More importantly, Dowd knows a great deal about respect, how it's earned, Oh, and how it's lost,
Yes.
and why it is so important. Much of the motivation for saving Israel by fulfilling Pesach and Matzah was to earn back the respect of his people that he had lost, so that he could honorably lead them through eternity. Respect.
Isn't that
That's
amazing?
why he did this.
Yeah.
That is a profound insight there, Kirk.
Yeah, no kidding.
He did this because he knew he had lost considerable respect, and that he knew that the only chance that he had to govern these people for all time was to earn it back. And of all of the possibilities, he had already defended Israel 66 times. It's like me with the 35 books. Yahowah said, you know, young man, writing 36 books, not going to make a whole lot of difference. So
Yeah.
I think it's time that you speak directly to my people, which is what we're doing now.
Yes.
With Dowd, all right, you defended Israel 66 times. Defending Israel 67 times probably isn't going to make that big a difference. So maybe we can come up with a different way for you to get their attention and earn their respect.
Yeah.
So how about this idea? You fulfill Pesach, Matzah Bikurym. You do that, and everyone
No denying now.
that is going to be part of your tribe, your flock going forward, without exception, will be there because you did this for them.
So,
Pretty much solves that problem, doesn't it?
yes, sir.
And so that's why it happened this way. There are two approaches to leadership, earned and imposed. Kings and generals demand compliance and achieve submission through fear. Questioning their edicts and orders comes at a very high price, and rejecting them is a deadly proposition. With them, their authority to rule is imposed through intimidation, incarceration, or death. Yeah, if I had, or you or I had challenged the mythos of Christianity, even though our points were inarguable, but if we had done so 200 years ago, 300 years ago, we'd have been tortured to death.
Burned at the stake, at least.
Yeah. No one would
Yeah.
bother to argue with us.
No.
Cut us in two and chew us up.
Yeah.
Dowd had been a shepherd, and he knew the importance of earning the respect of his flock. He had tangled with lions and bears, risking his life to protect them. As a shepherd king, the Messiah was devoted to protecting his people and defending their home. You know, I've seen some really amazing pictures of, there are sheepdogs that will go and run off coyotes, and when there's a pack of coyotes, they will attack the dog, and the dog will be injured, but often prevail against the coyotes and spare the sheep. And you know what the sheep do when the sheepdog comes back to the flock? They not only gather around him, but they'll lick the wounds to try to help heal it. They show their respect for what that
amazing, isn't
that
it?
dog has done. But people, not so much. Dowd had earned the sheep's, his flock's admiration, and even his people's admiration when he slew the foremost warrior of his day, who would have subjugated Israel had Dowd not prevailed. But he would squander it, of course, in the way that he responded to Shaul, also to Absalom, what he did to gain access to Bathsheba, get a drink of water from Bethlehem, to avoid having to trust completely and rely on Yahowah in a test of his judgment. But he earned it all back. As Yisrael's greatest defender, the Zeroah, protective ram and sacrificial lamb, knew that he would be able to endure whatever the Romans, as the Goliath of their day, brought to bear against him. This time he would use his body and soul, his body that his soul had occupied, as the stone. Consider his bashar, the sur, the rock. And you could even say that the ruach would be his sling.
Fair enough, yeah.
Or you could just say that he was the right hand of God.
Yeah.
And that God enabled.
That will work.
In so doing, he would earn his people's respect such that he would lead them as a shepherd, knowing that they trusted him. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you did as a research project is that you saw God's affinity for a shepherd king. God likes sheep, and that sheep are actually very smart. They're very loyal, and they're a communal animal, nonviolent. And so you understand why God had an affinity for sheep and a flock, and therefore someone who lives with the sheep would appeal to God, who nurtures the sheep, cares for the sheep. And Dowd brought that skill set in. There was another fellow that was a shepherd that did his best to shepherd God's flock for 40 years.
Yeah, well, Moshe, of course.
Moshe, yeah, Moshe.
Yeah.
So it would be just one more battle, just 2 days of conflict, and it would pay dividends forever. It was as brilliant as it was heroic. But knowing the full extent of the excruciating torture 1,000 years in advance, while recognizing it would be another 2,000 years beyond that time to anyone credit him for making these sacrifices for his people, yet he was still willing to carry out his commitment, which requires a level of courage and character that is only exemplified in a single solitary soul. So now we have a better appreciation for why Yahweh chose him, loved him.
Yeah.
You see, Dowd was not just willing, he wanted to do it. He sang about it. One stone was all he would need to fell the devilish giant that was threatening his people. The stone was leveled at Hasatan. Although when Yisrael denied Pesach's fulfillment and his foes turned the lamb into a god, I think it had to sting far worse than the whips. And I think to this day, when Dowd is angry about what has transpired, his anger is directed at his own people and for others for not only rejecting him, but wearing him like a skin, for counterfeiting, identity theft, robbing him. The pain would only last 15, 16 hours. But this rebellion against him,
sticks in you crawl.
2,000 years. As before, defending Israel by defeating those seeking to subjugate the people turned out to be far easier than subduing the more intrusive foe, devouring Israel at its core, Judaism. To resolve it, Dowd's soul would accept our guilt, carry it with him into hell, and endure matzah in Sheol. And after redeeming his people, Yahweh liberated Dowd's nephesh, saving him in an act that further enhanced the son's respect for his father and confidence in him, which is why he is singing about it here. He has witnessed in advance what he would endure and what would transpire. It would be a beautiful picture with Dowd now bathed in his father's light, reflecting his father's light. He would be the firstborn of Bikurym as a result of what he and his father accomplished on Passover and on yeasted bread, knowing that many would follow. Dowd then encourages us to do as he has done. Respect Yahweh. Choose to radiate his light. And we can count on the same result.
Mhm.
Now, what's also revealing in this regard is that halal, as we know, means to radiate light, not to reflect it.
Mhm.
For this to occur, we must have the source of light within us. Halal is almost always translated praise, Kirk, as you know, but
Yes.
this is not its primary definition, and it misses the point. Halal's preferred connotation is to shine, to radiate,
Mhm.
to be brilliant, bright, to make clear and visible something by bringing forth the illumination of it, enlightening by revealing its source.
Mhm.
While the secondary meaning of the word can be to extol in the sense of admiring, in addition to boasting. These inferences can lead to the word's dark side, where halal tertiary connotations include to make a show, to be praised for it, to create
Yeah.
a grandiose
Show off.
appearance, and to be foolish and insolent and arrogant. And it's this dark side of halal combined with this wanting to be brilliant and illuminating that caused it to be Satan's first name. It's halal bin shakar.
Yeah.
So the darkness associated with halal's light exists because Jesus Christ wasn't the only counterfeit to torment God's people. According to the prophetic portrayal of Satan presented in Yashayah, Isaiah 14, halal bin shakar is the name of the most prevalent counterfeit god of all time. He is the Lord of Christianity, the Allah of Islam, the G-D and the Hashem of Judaism. The Messiah Dowd carried all that pertains to his aspirations to be worshipped as the God of religion into Sheol with him. It was the biggest of all burdens. I think I'll end with this thought. I had a person try to mock me on email last night.
Yes.
And they said that there would be no chance that Yahowah or Dowd would say no thank you in English. As I told you when we finished our Passover show a week ago Friday, that I turned and I held a piece of the lamb up symbolically, and I just said, thank you, thank you, Dowd, for what you have done. And what I saw and heard was no, thank you. Now, I don't. This person said, you saw them in heaven. How'd you see them in heaven? I didn't say I saw them in heaven. I saw them right there in my mind's eyes. It's just like you look, and that's what I saw out in the above the ocean there. And I don't recall saying that they spoke English. But this person said, why would they speak English since it is a pagan language?
Pagan language?
Pagan language.
Yahweh's language?
Yeah, that English is a pagan language. And so
I'm
I
sorry.
wrote them back. I wrote them back and said, excuse me, but languages aren't religious. English is no more pagan than Hebrew or Greek or Roman or Latin or anything else. You can communicate religious ideas in every language. As a matter of fact, there are tons of religious ideas communicated in Hebrew because the Jews were overtly religious. But languages in themselves are not religious. They're communication tools. And if you're going to communicate with Jews today to get their attention, what language do most Jews speak? Virtually every Jew. English.
Yeah,
English.
So far.
Yeah, virtually every Jew that can be reached in Israel, which would be all but the Haredim. They can't be reached anyway, so we're not even concerned about them.
Sure. No.
They, from the time that they're in first grade all the way through college, they study English. even in Israel. And of course, there are more Jews in America even than Israel. And of course, they also are fluent in English. And even the Jews in Canada would be fluent in English, which is where the next most numerous concentration of Jews would be. And then you go from there to France and England, where it's either the primary language or the secondary language. If you want to reach Jews today, the language you need to speak to them is English, the very language that we're speaking now. There'll be a time when all we will all speak is Hebrew, the language of God. But don't think for a moment that language is something that should not be used when trying to communicate with the most people at any particular time. Well, language is the most powerful tool we have, whether it's the spoken word or the written word. And all we have done here recently is move from the written word to the spoken word. And even in our spoken word programs, we're sharing the translations that we have previously written. So it is something that is important for Jews to recognize that secular Jews, which are the only ones that we can actually reach, so the super political Jews, the progressives, and the super religious Jews, the Haredim, we have zero chance of ever reaching, because evidence and reason are irritants to them because they don't fit within their belief systems. And for the overwhelming percentage of those people that are reachable, this is the right tool. And even as you were doing your glossary, everything that God communicates to us is in Hebrew.
Yes.
But it's essential that we examine what those words mean, the letters that comprise the words, what they communicate to us, and the original meaning of that word as it was written before the diacritical markings or before modern contrivances. For example, in Hebrew now, and modern Hebrew, what would you guess is the single most influential source of words for modern Hebrew? The Torah, the Talmud, or English?
English.
They
mostly speak English.
English. And the reason it is, it's English is such an essential language to describe the things that we live with now every day. Modern world.
It only started with 8,000 words to begin with. So, how do you explain airplane and jet plane and all that kind of stuff?
Right. And of those 8,000 words, in terms of verbs or nouns with considerable meaning, there's probably, you get down to 2,000 maybe at the most. And there's probably 500 of those that have significant play within the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. So it happens to be English 1, the Talmud 2, and English 3. Excuse me, it's English 1, Talmud is 2, and the Torah is 3 in terms of
they won't look at the Torah
on the language that exists today. So all things to think about. We're going to continue to convey what we have learned, and just as you wrote your glossary, you studied the Hebrew words and every nuance that can be known about them and their roots and all of these sorts of things.
And the pictographs.
You wrote your explanations in the language that is the lingua franca of the world.
Yes, sir.
English. And of course, because you're Kirk, you did it by hand, because
of course
you are more analog than I am.
Today's work. Complete with pictographs. Yeah. It's fun for me.
Yeah.
I'm not pushing it on anybody. It's just fun for me.
Yeah, you found out that there you are. That those original those original letters.
Yes, sir.
What he's showing you is the original alphabet for the Torah, where every letter conveys some aspect of humanity or human life.
Yes.
And they're all directional, and they all from a ram that's part of the flock that is so much part of our lives and with the lives of God's people, to a home that is there to the staff, feet,
It leads you,
mouth,
yeah, it protects
mouth,
you. Yeah.
teeth, face, and eyes. Person standing up, reaching up to
Shema,
God. Oh yeah,
Shama,
an
yeah.
eye, you name it. A hand, both this part of the hand and then another one that's an open palm of a hand.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's cool language.
yeah, it's all there. It's a language that was written to speak to people about people.
Yes.
So thank you, Kirk, for giving up part of your Shabbat.
No, it's my
to be with us.
pleasure. My
Say hello
pleasure.
to Sylvia.
I will. Keep listening.
You have a lovely day. I see you're all bundled up there in
Yeah.
beautiful sunny California. As
I have my
we look
right.
up here and the sun is
I know.
setting.
Don't do that. That's not fair to do that. That's
I know.
mean.
It's actually chilly today. It's down by
What's 79?
oh no, 83.
52, maybe.
52. Well,
Ah,
it,
I'm gonna walk it down. We might get up to 59.
It has occasionally gotten down to 72 here. I haven't experienced that.
Oh,
That it begins to snow at 71. But we haven't-
I'll send you some more towels, some more blankets.
Thank you. All right. Well, you've just heard hopefully an entertaining version of the YAHOWAH blog. He is Kirk. I am Craig. Looking forward to being with you next time. Good day.
Thank